Hi, today I'm going to show you the Sonlight instructor guides from my son's high school. He's going to be in 10th grade this year. He's going to be studying the 20th century world history, level 320, and the classical literature, level 230. So this is a Sonlight instructor binder, and it's really sturdy, good quality. And so this here is the parent guide. This is the parent guide for both the history and literature. And I'm just going to store it in here. So it comes with all these weekly tabs. And I'm not going to pull this out every day because it's just too big, but it works great for storage for the year. So here I have a better binder from Staples, and this is my binder with the parent guide. And this is where I'm going to store about 4 or 5 weeks at a time. So it comes with this little pouch at the beginning. I'm going to store timeline figures. Now, the high school cores do not come with timeline figures like the cores A through W do. You're meant to write in timeline information when you come across it in the instructor guide. But these are all leftover from all the years. We've been doing Sonlight with him since about 1st grade. And so we have a lot of like leftover timeline figures that we just never got to. You know, some years we were good about using them, some years we weren't. So I just have them all here stored that we haven't used. And we're just going to go through, not, this year plus maybe next year and maybe even his 12th grade year, and just work through them and do like 3 or 4 a day. So here's his book of time. And he's had this, since 1st grade. And so, he's got a lot of stuff in here. Some pages have a lot, some pages don't have very much. So we're just going to kind of fill in with some of the timeline figures. Just do a few of them a day until it's done. And that'd be a good way for reviewing different people and events. So here I have a folder. I'm not sure if I'm going to need a folder for him, but just in case I want to put some stuff, I can stick it in there. So here's the cover for the 20th century world history, level 320. And just gives you some basic information. Here's a table of contents. And here's a book list page, which is really helpful. I do a lot of working throughout the year with the book list page. So here, I will cross out books. When I first get a core or a package from Sonlight, I'll go through and I'll make 3 piles. One pile is, yes, we're definitely going to read this. Another pile is, maybe we'll read this. And the third pile is, no, we're not going to read this. And the maybe books, I'll kind of go through a little more in depth, maybe pre-read. Sometimes I'll read the whole thing, but I don't always have time to read through all the books. So the books I'm going to take out, I'll just store on a shelf, and then I got to figure out what I'm going to substitute with. So the books, Know What You Believe, Know Why You Believe. These are sort of like Protestant materials, and we're an Eastern Orthodox Christian family, so I'd rather use Orthodox books for that. So there's 2 books here that are Orthodox books that I'm going to use. I'm going to keep the How to Ruin Your Life by 30, and I'm a big C.S. Lewis fan, so I'm going to keep the Mere Christianity. So that'll be what he's doing for his Bible, or I just call them faith books. For his history, the main book that they're using is A Visual History of the Modern World. And then here's all the biographies and historical fiction type books. So there's a lot. This is one of the reasons I love Sonlight for history in high school, is because it's not just a textbook. You get a main spine kind of book, like a fact book. Then you get all these other great biographies, historical fiction to really enhance your studies, and I like that. Now these last 4, maybe you can't see, but I've crossed them off. I'm just going to choose not to do those. And it works out well because it's at the end of the year. So if we get behind, this will give us a little buffer. And I do have 2 books here. A Stalin biography by Albert Marin. Albert Marin has some really great history books. And The Way of the Pilgrim is an Orthodox book. So, if we have time here at the end of the year, I'm going to stick those in. So then here's just some more information. And then here's the classic literature. Now, one thing great about Sonlight is that you can mix and match their literature and history. So I chose not to do the literature level 300. It just looked kind of depressing. There was That's already going to be a tough core to get through because modern history is not always very pleasant. And they even warn you that it's going to talk about a lot of difficult and challenging subject matter. So I just did not want to add the literature as well. I decided I'd rather just do the classic literature instead. And so that's what we're going to be working on. And here's the table of contents. And here is the book list. Oh, one thing I didn't show before is I've written map next to the ones. Not every story, not every history book has a map that you do mapping with. So I just wrote map here just to remind me that there's map exercises to go with that book. So here we go. Here's all the literature books. Now there's Jane Eyre, and I just wrote movie because we might just watch the movie instead of having him read the book. I don't think he's going to have a book. I know people say you shouldn't have boy books and girl books, but Jane Eyre and Pride and Prejudice, I really don't think my son's going to like. And the movie, the BBC version with Colin Firth is so good. I mean, it's practically just like the book. I mean, it's amazing how it's almost like word for word. So I think we might just watch the movie instead. And I don't even know. I mean, I don't think he's really going to go for those stories. We'll see. So here's a few I crossed off, and I'm going to put in the book Dune by Frank Herbert. That's a really classic science fiction book. It's an excellent book, and I know my son will like that. So he likes science fiction, fantasy. So if I can try to take some books out and put that sort of stuff in, it'll just make it more enjoyable for him. So there's some other books here. Here I'm taking off a couple books. I'm going to put in Time Machine, H.G. Wells, and Journey to the Center of the Earth by Jules Verne. And here's the optional workbooks you can do. Vocabulary books, analogies is kind of like I suppose sort of like a logic or something, critical thinking, but I'm not going to do those. This year I purchased a grammar book for him to do, and also I want him to start studying for the SAT. So we're going to be doing those things instead of that. And so that's just more. So now we're going to get to the weeks. And I'm going to start with week 2 because I got week 1 is really penciled in and stuff. So you're going to start your week here with all the Bible books, faith books, and we're going to be reading the How to Ruin Your Life by 30. And then they have a Bible and memorization. Now, I don't know if I'm probably not going to be doing this with him. We'll see. There's a lot of reading in these high school courses. I mean, he's reading a faith book, plus he's reading 2 history books, plus his literature books. So that's 4 books that he's reading from each day. So I don't know. We're going to be doing like Bible reading in the morning as a family. So I think we're probably not going to do the Bible reading from here, even though I think this would be great because you're actually starting with Genesis and you're going to read all the way through Genesis. I think that would be great for him to read that. So we'll see if we have time, but I don't want to push it. I don't want to push too much. The memorization, probably not. Probably won't be doing that. Now these little symbols here, the clock is for a timeline stuff, and the globe is for map. So that's just indicating to you that after each one of these reading lessons, that there's going to be some kind of mapping or timeline to do. And I just made a note to myself that I would like him to do kind of like a weekly written narration of his visual history of the world that he writes. Just some sort of written work to have collected in a notebook for him, just for him to do something. We'll see how that works. So now for the instructions. You don't get a lot of instructions for the Bible stuff. But with the history here, the visual history of the modern world, there's going to be a lot of discussion questions, and there'll be notes. Sometimes there's a lot of notes, almost too much. Core 100 has like just a ridiculous amount of notes. It's just really hard to get through with all the books you're reading. So the best way to handle notes, I mean, look at all these notes. This is a whole page here, whole page here. This is all notes. This is just, the authors, the people who made Sonlight, the Holzmans, the family there. This is just their, them talking about different things. And sometimes they do say important stuff. So usually the best way that I handle notes, like when we did Core 100, is to spend some time at the beginning of the week on Sunday night read through the notes and take a highlighter, take some highlighters and just highlight any points that I think are good. Any discussion questions that seem really good to talk about, any notes, any good points that he makes in here. But I don't have my son read these notes. I just have him read the books. I think the notes would be just way too much. And here's some timeline. The black bold is the timeline. And again, you just write these in the book of time. There's no figure to go with it. And then the earth here, that's going to be the mapping. And then you just have more, day 1, day 2, day 3, day 4, day 5. Now when it comes to doing the maps are kind of not as easy to use as like the younger cores. That's my biggest criticism probably is the maps. The maps and the notes, I think, are the most difficult thing to deal with these high school cores. But, okay, so here you have the map, or the maps. Here's London, Belgium, Congo. So you have to go, so first you look at the book. The book is Visual History of the Modern World. And so all of these maps are going to come from the maps for that book. So then you go back here to section 3 with all of your maps, and each map is like titled with what book it's coming from. So here's Visual History of the Modern World map 1. There's several maps for that book. So that's a big book. So you have to look at map 1, and then the little circle here says a number 2. So you go over here to map 1. You find number 2, and there's London. Now, this is the parent map, so this is sort of the answer sheet. Now, the student map is going to be all empty. So that's like a lot of steps to go through to do these maps. So I really struggle with Core 100. To be honest, we didn't even do the mapping. I hope when they redo these high school guides that they will figure out how to do the mapping. One thing a person can do, and this would be a lot of work, but you could put in the answers yourself. Just put in the answer, like write London, write in everything, and then just give this to your child as you're reading, just so they can see where it is. And if they want, then they can put it on their blank map. But the whole process, see, like this is not really answers to me. I mean, it's just telling me a number, but I would really love to actually have what each one of these are. Like this is London. I would like it to be written there. So it's just an extra step that can be, just kind of difficult when you're trying to do everything else. One thing with the high school cores is that, your kids, they get credits based on like how many hours. I mean, yes, you get credits for completing a curriculum, but when it comes to like history and literature, they also get it on hours, and it's very easy. You could spend way over an hour doing all of this stuff. I mean, if you're reading the 2 history books, plus you're going through some of these questions, plus you're doing all this timeline and map stuff, you could spend way over an hour a day. And so they only need an hour to get a credit from. Now, I do know, that sometimes I just want my kids to have information. I want them to learn things. It's not just about gaining credits. But I also have to be careful how much I stretch that, how much I go over an hour. Because my son, sometimes he can take a whole hour just to read the books. I mean, he's reading 2 books each day. And a lot of times when we were doing Core 100, it would take him the whole hour to just read the history books. And so we didn't do a lot of other stuff. So that's something to keep in mind. You really have to prioritize and pick and choose. And for me, the timeline and the map stuff is like just an extra thing. And if we don't do it, we don't do it. So now I have a divider, and I'm going to get into my literature part. So here we have the literature week. And you're going to start off with your book. You're reading just one book, but here, Till We Have Faces ends, and so they're starting the other book. And there's always a poetry book with Sonlight. And here is the creative expression, which is the writing, and you'll be writing a response paper. So basically with high school, you're just basically doing one writing assignment a week. And it'll give you a little bit of instructions on how to do that. And here are the optional workbooks, which we're probably not going to use. We're not going to do those. So I'm probably going to white it out using this. Maybe I'll use washi tape. I'm not sure. But I might just white it out so I don't have to look at it. Sometimes if I look at stuff, it makes me feel guilty like I should be doing it. So that's why I want to white it out, because I just don't want to see it. So here we have, for the till we have vases, there's a whole bunch of vocabulary. A lot of vocabulary words. And then there's like questions to discuss after you read. Now some don't have this many questions. Some just have like a couple. Some days will just be a couple questions. And then there'll also be, like, at the beginning of a book and the end of a book, you're going to talk about setting, characters, point of view, conflict, theme, which is really great. That's where the literary analysis comes in. And then you'll have your creative expression assignment, response paper. And this is just something that they will spend all week working on. So they will write a little bit each day. Maybe they'll just spend 2 days. They can choose maybe which day they want to write it. Like maybe you can say you have to have this done by Wednesday. So that will give you time to like look at it and make any corrections and have them their final paper due on Friday. Sometimes you may not want them to have, you may not want to correct their paper that extensively each week. I mean, because that can be a lot. So maybe just once a month, you can just have them, write their assignment each week. And maybe at the end of the month, you collect their 3 or 4 assignments that they did that month and let them choose which one they want to have, that they want to edit and make it, a nicer paper to make it, fix all the mistakes. So that's something to think about, because it's really hard, like every week, to just really, go through the whole editing process. Every week might be a little much. So it really depends upon you and your student and how you want to handle that. So here you have notes. So how I usually handle the notes is I give my son, basically after lunch, he'll work on his Sonlight course. So he'll get his other subjects done in the morning. And then the afternoon is when he works on his Sonlight core. And he'll spend 2.5 hours reading his history and his literature and doing what his stuff is supposed to be. And then we'll sit down for half an hour at the end of the school day, and I will go through all these different vocabulary and notes with him. And if I've made any highlighting, and we'll just talk about what he's done that day, what he's read that day. So so he doesn't use the notes. Even though the student guide does have notes, I don't have him read through it or use it really. That's just something for me and for us to do together. So that's the end of what a week would look like with the history and the literature and the Bible. So then you get into the appendices. And the appendices are the maps, and I've kind of showed you how the maps work. There's a map for not all the books. That's why on the book list, I sort of wrote next to it which book has a map, so I know ahead of time. So these are basically all of the maps for history. Then they just give you some extra information here to read. They talk about current events. We don't do the current events. You can do current events. They want you to talk about current events. They suggest getting one of these Christian God's World publication. I've thought about getting that book. The World magazine actually looks pretty good. I think I might try it, but it's like $60. I thought it was kind of expensive. So I don't know. And here's a practical life skills checkoff list. This is kind of interesting. These are just extra things that you wouldn't know. Just something that maybe you didn't think about. Here's a scope and sequence for the history. And here's the timeline. Now another way you can do the timeline looks like it's only going to be coming from the history of the world, the visual history of the modern world book. Another thing with timeline that you could do instead of doing like it on a daily basis is that you could, maybe do it like after 4 weeks, and then you could use this schedule here instead, to see like what year you're on. You know, like once you reach up to 1910 or something, then you can have your son or your child just put in all these dates. Then, you know, that might be a little bit easier than doing it on a day-to-day basis. That's probably how we'll do it, is to do it that way and to use this instead of the individual assignments, the daily individual assignments. So here's field trip planning and some extra additional schedule pages for other subjects. So here's the section 3 for the literature, and there are some maps for even in the literature as well. And there's the practical skills thing. And they also have really great thing here, literary analysis overview. This is a great thing to read. So like I said before, at the beginning and the ending of each book, they're going to tell you about setting, characters, you know, different literary analysis elements. So this here will give you details of how to talk about that, how to teach that with the book. Now, I, for one, am somebody who doesn't think you need a lot of literary analysis. So to me, this is enough. This is enough information for me to be able to, you know, sit down and talk about books, you know, for literature. And then there's like a little graph here. Practical skills. And here's a scope and sequence. This will give you the list of writing assignments. I've already read through each one of the writing assignments, and I've sort of made a check mark about the ones that I don't really like all that much and we might skip. So I'll either make up my own, or we might just have a light week that time. That might be good. Just do something else. And then this is really great here. This will tell you information about how to do a research project. And this is a pretty good size, a lot of pages in here that'll give you details on how, because you do a research paper and that takes several weeks to do. And so this is a good thing for your student to read and for you to read to help through that process. So that in section 4 is just new user information, how to set up your guide. So that essentially is the parent guide for the high school instructor guides. The only thing different between the parent guide and the student guide is that the parent guide has answers. So I didn't really show that, but so the answers here, you'll see in sort of written in italics. You know, the British forces entered Tibet to prevent incursions in the area by what country? And then here's a little arrow and it says Russia. So here you'll see little italics written, and that's what the parent guide has. The student guide still has all the notes and pretty much everything else. It's just the answers of the questions is different. And the reason that they made a parent guide is so that, you know, the parent and the student can sit down together and go through all those notes and those questions and stuff together, instead of having to share it. So it's a really good idea to get both, you know, to be able to sit down and discuss. So that's the parent guide. Now for the student guide, I have a binder as well for storage. And this, again, the same binder. This is just for storage. And for my son's binder for the student guide, I don't have a cover yet for his. But it's just, there's not a whole lot more to show you here. I'll show you here what a week. The difference, again, is that there's answers in the parent guide. But for the student guide, this is also his like planner. I mean, this is what he's going to check off as he gets stuff done. So I'll cross off stuff that we're not going to do. And, you know, I'm not sure what to do World Magazine. And here I put down his extra subjects. So math, I put 4 boxes because he's working on math 4 times during the week. And his Japanese, he's working on 5 times. And for his science, I'm going to write in each week what his science assignment is. So I use the student guide as basically his planner that he works from. Now, he doesn't have to worry about all these notes. We're going to go through the notes together. And then I have this divider that I made for him to go over to his literature. And I use washi tape here to just, you know, wash out so he doesn't have to see the optional workbooks that he's not going to be doing. And here you can write in, like he's going to be doing that Easy English, Chapter 1. And it's only just once a week. So now he will have to read the writing assignment. But otherwise, all these notes are things that we're going to go through together. Now, you could have your child go through all the notes if you wanted to be, especially if they're a good reader and they're a fast reader and they get their work done. I know of a lot of high school, students who do Sonlight, and they do all the stuff on their own. In fact, I know of some families who they write out the answers to these questions. I wouldn't want to do that, but you could do that. You could have them choose like 1 or 2 questions maybe and write out an answer and keep it in a notebook. But I think for my son, for his literature, I think the weekly writing assignment will be enough, and us kind of discussing and talking about the books, I think that's going to be enough for him. For the history, I think just doing a once a week weekly narration where he writes a written narration, like once a week on the visual history of the world. And I think at the end of each book, each biography or historical book, I'm going to have him write like a paragraph or 2 about something that was important to him or that he remembered from the book. And I think that should be good for written work. And then everything else will be just like us discussing things. So to me, that's the biggest part about Sonlight. I'm really not going to put too much stock into if we miss mapping or timeline stuff. To me, it's really about reading the books and about, just talking about them and doing some sort of written work with the books. To me, that's the most important thing. Everything else is kind of extra. And if we get, we get. If we don't, we don't. Now, one other option I'm thinking about doing for mapping, instead of using their maps in here, but again, it depends if we have time, is to use this. You get a CD with it. This is the book. It's a really beautiful book. And they have lesson plans for the New World. Now, this would work really well for Core 100. See, it talks about Jamestown, Plymouth Colony, 30-Year War, the Middle Colonies. It's not strictly all American, like Core 100 is all America. But it's, I think that would work out really well. Now, for the modern world, I was thinking I could go through all the lesson plans for the modern world because these maps are so nice. They are just really gorgeous maps. These are from Knowledge Quest. And so here's like the lesson plans. He would be level C. So it'll tell you exactly what to label. So it'll tell you the map, and then you just go print off that map, and it'll tell you everything that you're supposed to label. And in here will be like the answer key, because here's like all the book. Here's all. So he could look at the book, and he could just copy the map. I do think copying is a good way of just remembering too, even though some people might say, oh, well, you're giving him the answers. Well, to me, I'm just, I think he's going to learn from looking at the map and copying it on his own. So this would be a much easier way to do mapping instead of what they have you do in the Sonlight instructor guides. This would be much easier to do. So I may do that. I may print off like just a few maps and see how that works. But I think I'm going to see, how our week goes with him just reading and seeing if we even have time for it. I do plan on his 12th grade year doing North Star Geography. I think that looks like a really great curriculum. So even though I love to do geography every year, with Sonlight, I've always tried to do some kind of maps using either the markable map or printing off my own map. So I've always tried to do geography every year to go along with our reading our books because I really like that. But with high school, it's a lot harder because subjects seem to take a lot longer and you just don't have as much time to do a lot of that stuff like we did when he was younger. So, it's really no big deal if we don't get the geography done because he's going to have a full geography course for his 12th grade year. So, but I do think this is a really good thing to use. So that is the student guide for Sonlight. I would like to end by just talking a little bit about the pros and cons of using Sonlight for high school. The prose is definitely the strong literature component. This is really important to me, to have a variety of books, a lot of literature curriculum that I've looked at for high school. They will have you only read like 4, maybe 8 books, and they really analyze the book almost like they analyze it to death. And I would much rather have my child read lots of books and just do a little bit of literary analysis. I don't like all the in-depth, dissecting a book. It makes me think of, the movie Dead Poet Society, when Robin Williams' character was teaching the English class, and he was talking about the Pritchard scale and how, the textbook they were working from talked about, putting Shakespeare and Byron, grading it on a Pritchard scale on whether it was good or worthy. And, Robin Williams' character was all about just teaching them to enjoy poetry and enjoy literature. And that's really what I want to do. And that's why I think Sonlight really works with that, because you're reading lots of books, lots of variety of books, and you're just doing enough literary analysis to like explore the book a bit and talk about it, but not overdoing it. And I also like all the variety of books for history. I'm not a big fan of textbooks. You kind of need them for science, you kind of need them for math. But for history, and literature and stuff, I really try to stay away. So I like all the variety of books that Sonlight has for history. And humanities is really what Sonlight teaches best. I mean, I know people think of Sonlight as being literature and history, but to me, humanities is where you're talking about human beings and how they interact with challenges and how they've interacted throughout history. And to me, that's like the most important thing, because there's no way your child can experience all these things, but through books, they can experience through the characters the challenges of war, the challenges of relationships, things like that. So humanities is really important to me, and so that's where Sonlight is so good at. The negative things would be sometimes you get too many books in the high school core, and it's, depending upon how fast of a reader you've got. Of course, the solution to that is just to take out books, or to use movies, or to use audiobooks. And sometimes the other negative thing would be those notes, especially in Core 100. Those notes are just sometimes pages, and sometimes they don't really add a lot. So again, but you don't have to read the notes. I mean, you're going to get so much if you just read the books. And the other last thing, I guess, is the maps. That would be a negative thing. I don't like how they do their mapping for high school. So I do hope they'll change some of that when they if they ever redo their high school course. I hope they look at the maps and the notes. And I would love to see a 4-day and a 5-day schedule for high school. They've sort of made it sound like they don't plan to do that, but I would really love that. I would love to have a 4-day schedule for high school. So that's all that I have for you today. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day. God bless.